Before I begin my sermon today at all 6 of our locations, did you hear me? 6 locations. So congratulations to Beaver Valley as you have your first Friends and Family service today. So today across all of our campuses, before I start preaching, I want to acknowledge 2 very important days. Okay, first being Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, this coming Monday, and then the Sanctity of Human Life Sunday, next Sunday, January 22nd. And the reason that I mention these 2 days is because these issues that they represent are very much connected. Because when you and I devalue a human life, whether it's an unborn child or someone living in poverty, an immigrant or a refugee, an orphan or a widow, or someone from a different nation or a different race from us, we grieve the heart of God. Right? As we all know, Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. We don't have to look very far in this world, maybe just our social media feeds, to realize that his dream is not yet fully realized today. And the thing that we have to understand is that that is actually God's dream for this world, for our nation. As long as there are injustices in this world, God's people, the church, you and me, that's us, we will be called to stand in the gap, despite what we might be seeing in the media. So let's remember today to celebrate our uniquenesses and to embrace our differences, but to also stand in the gap for those who are in the margins. Let's remember that every person that we encounter matters to the living God. And let's remember to continue the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., to be bearers of peace in this world, to be bearers of love, because that's what the gospel of Jesus Christ is all about. That's what it means to follow Jesus. The gospel compels us to not stand idly by, but to speak up and to speak on behalf, to speak love, to live differently, and to never quit this fight. And I think it's fitting today that we start a series entitled The Last Arrow, because this series and these 2 weeks that we are minding Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and the sanctity of human life, they're actually very deeply connected. See, each and every person in this world has been given a life, a quiver full of arrows, to be able to shoot at the God destiny that we've been given. But here's the reality: millions upon millions of little ones were never able to shoot their arrows at their destiny because their lives were stolen, taken from them. The reality is that among us today, in the margins, are many people who are still being oppressed by the injustices, by the systems that are weighing them down, never able to shoot the arrows that they've been designed for. And we see Martin Luther King Jr., people like him, who shoot every possible last arrow that God has given to him to fulfill a dream that God has put into his heart to make a difference in this world. As we kick off this series today, know that you were born with a very specific and special calling on your life that nobody else can fulfill. You were given an arrow of potential to shoot and hit the target of your God-given destiny, but you have a choice to make. I have a choice to make. Big question for this entire series as we kick it off today. Will I live the life that I was born to live? Or will I die regretting who I've become? That's what this series is going to be about today. And are we going to be able to hit the target of our God-given destiny? See, this series is going to be a life changer for many of us. And I'm excited for the opportunity to draw out these God-sized dreams in all of us, the potential in all of us. The next 3 weeks has the potential for God to awaken within you what He's designed you for to hit the target. And Pastor Scott and I, we're going to give it our best shot. See what I did there? So he's going to be up next week, and then I'm going to also close out the series on the back end. See, we got the title. Let me just set this up. We got the title of this series from a great book by pastor and author Erwin McManus, The Last Arrow. I highly recommend it to you. But what we're going to teach in this series is not actually what he writes about in this book. We just really like the title and the concept of this series. And it's a quote that was found in his book that we're going to launch this series from. And you've been hearing it. Here it is. What will haunt you until your final breath is who you could have been but never became, and what you could have done but never did. See, that really makes you think over the way that you've been living your life. And then it thinks about your future. Are we going to carry neglected opportunities, arrows of potential that could have been, into the next life? Or are we going to give this life everything that we possibly can? So in this series, we're going to be in the Old Testament books of 1 Chronicles 11 and its parallel text, 2 Samuel 23. And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be studying, I love this, David's mighty men. These incredible band of brothers who were with David before he was even crowned king. From the point that they were running for their lives from a mad king by the name of Saul to then the military victories under David's command. David's mighty men are going to teach us what it means to live a life without regret. Many of us in here, I would say all of us, have regret. And these guys are going to teach us because they were living their lives from a God-driven mission. That's why they can teach us these things. See, these men lived by principles that I believe, please hear me on this, are in danger of becoming extinct in our culture today. Principles that these mighty men of David not only believed in, but they actually lived by. And there's a huge difference between believing in something and actually acting out your belief. And so I hope this series is going to be something that God just wells up inside of you. And so as we begin it all at all 6 of our campuses today, let me pray for us, okay? Let's pray. So God, I simply pray right here in this series that you would teach us how to tap into and to live from the potential that you have given to us, God. Would you awaken within us the dream that you have for our lives? And would you give us the strength and the courage to live the life that you've destined for us? And everybody said, amen. All right, let's dig in. If you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Chronicles 11 with me. So 2 Samuel 23 and 1 Chronicles 11, nearly identical as they list out 37 men who were serving in David's tight leadership circle. They're known as David's mighty men, so I want to begin today reading from 1 Chronicles 11. Here's how it goes, okay? Now these are the chiefs of David's mighty men, who gave him strong support in his kingdom, together with all Israel, to make him king, according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. This is an account of David's mighty men. And then what follows here is these epic one-liners, or sometimes a paragraph of these incredible battles that were led by one or a few of David's mighty men. And so we start off here today with this incredible, just this story of one particular man that we're going to look at, just one person today. And we're going to look at the battle that he was a part of. And see, when we study this throughout this series, many of us are going to have a hard time believing that these stories are actually real. Because this is the stuff that movies are made of. But here's the thing that you have to realize. We're not dealing with just ordinary men. These are actually the black ops of their day, the Navy SEALs of their day. These are professional soldiers that we're going to be reading about. Heroes described as warriors, highly skilled, disciplined men who were under David's command. And today we're going to look at one of them, and we're going to learn a principle from the way that he lived his life. And it was a principle that David taught his mighty men and the way that they should live their lives, not only in battle, but then also with their very lives as they served their king. Now, we don't know much more than what's written here about these men, but the first is this. David's mighty men is Jehoshabem, okay? Yashovaham, who is a Hakmonite. Try to say that, right? I've been practicing all week and I messed it up again, all right? And he was the chief of the three. And look at this. He wielded a spear against 300 whom he killed at one time. Now, this is one bad dude that you did not want to mess with. So we start off our study today, check this out, with a guy who we might be familiar with, okay, and maybe in your culture of Rambo, William Wallace, Liam Neeson, Jason Bourne, Jon Snow, all rolled into one. This guy is one bad dude. So here we have, one day Yeshofaham finds himself in a situation where he is facing insurmountable odds. There is a massive enemy around him. Now you got to know this, as we study 2 Samuel 23 and 1 Chronicles 11, there's actually a textual discrepancy here. So if you read 2 Samuel 23, it'll actually say that he fought 800 men at once. So 1 Chronicles 11 says 300. So we don't know exactly why there's this difference, but I think about, how easy it would have been. Think about it if you were translating all these things, how easy it would be to translate an 8 as a 3 or a 3 as an 8, vice versa, right? But I don't want us to get hung up there. The point of this passage is this. The odds were completely stacked against Yoshavaham. All right, he is completely outnumbered, either 800 or 300, and he has a choice to make. Is he going to run or is he going to stay and fight? Even though the possibility of victory seems to be far out of reach here, he knows the right thing to do is to stay and fight for what is right, even if it costs him his life. Because here's the thing. He was fighting for more than just himself. He was fighting for his king, David. And he was fighting for his nation, Israel. He was fighting as God's person. And so let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a place like that? Have you ever been in a situation like this? Where you knew the right thing to do. You knew it. But doing the right thing might mean that you might not survive. Now, I realize that's very extreme, right? Because maybe you're here and you've never had the opportunity to, in a life or death situation. But I'm guessing at 6 campuses, we've had a few people that have been in life and death situations. But maybe it's not that extreme for us. And maybe it looks different in our recent history. So when I think about people in our recent history, I think who know what's right and they actually did what was right and their lives were on the line, I think about people like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison fighting for a democratic South Africa. I think about people like Martin Luther King Jr., right? Who died, who gave his life fighting for what was right so that his kids would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I think about Rosa Parks, who was sick and tired of fighting against what was wrong. And so she finally said, no more. I will not give in. And she never gave up her bus seat. Of course, these are famous people at this point now in our history. And those might be extreme situations because their lives were literally on the line. But that's not how most of us live our lives. So what about you? How does this apply to you and me? Well, maybe in your job, you see what's going on behind the scenes or under the table. And you know you should say something. But you know that if you say something, it might cost you your job or the promotion. The question is, are you going to fight for what is right? Right? You might be here today and you would say that your spouse has said that your marriage is all but dead. But you know that the right thing to do is to fight with everything that was in you for that marriage to be reconciled. No matter what your friends are saying, no matter what your counselor might be saying to throw in the towel on that marriage, are you going to do what is right? Fight for what is right. If you're a middle schooler or a high school student or a college student who is fighting against the crowd, who's taking you down a path, right? You're faced with these things every day. Underage drinking. You see somebody who's being bullied. You know the right thing to do is to speak up, right? Performance-enhancing drugs, if you're on the team. The inappropriate text, should I send it or not? And you know that the right thing to do might cost you that friendship. It might cost you that starting position on the team. It might cost you the better grade, or worse yet, your innocence or your purity. So are you going to fight for what is right? And what Yeshovaham shows us here is a principle that I like to call oughta, a principle of oughta, right? I ought to do what is right. It's a principle of integrity. Even if it costs me, I ought to do what is right. And so here's the last arrow principle that I want every one of us to walk out of here knowing today. And I want you to remember that this is an action-based principle. It's not just a belief, it's an action-based belief. So here it is. I will do what is right, even when the odds are stacked against me. That's what we see from this account. No matter how much peer pressure, no matter how much it's going to cost me, no matter how much it will set me back in my career, I will do what is right, even when the odds are stacked against me. Now, here's the thing. If you're here today and you are not a follower of Christ, you're not a Christian, but you're here. First of all, I just want to say welcome to you. Okay, I want to talk with you for 1 second, but I'm not sure why you're here. Maybe your mom invited you to come, right? Maybe that hot girl invited you to come and you're like, hey, I'm here. But you came for this last Arrow series, and I'm really glad that you came. Here's the thing. I think that this principle, regardless of whether you are a Christian or not, you believe in. I mean, what decent human being would not agree that the right thing is the right thing? But we have a problem, because who or what gets to determine what is right? We have to wrestle that question to the ground. Who determines what is right? Do I get to determine that for me and you? Do you get to determine that for me? Do parents get to determine what's right for their kids? Do teachers? Do bosses? You can see the tension that we live in, Christian or not, right? So we have to wrestle this. Who gets to determine what is right? So by way of a silly example here, all right, let's just play this out. What if I decided that it was right to punch your mama? Right, seriously, what if I decided that it was right to punch your mama right in the face? Well, you would say, well, that's wrong. Why? Because there's laws against it. You can't punch my mama in the face because that's called assault, and you'll get arrested for that. Okay, so you answered it, right? You said that the government chooses what is right for me. Okay, so let's play that out then. If the government chooses what is right for me, then what if I decide that it is right to have an affair with your mama? Government authorities don't have much to say or laws about me having an affair with your mama. But yet somehow you know in your knower that doesn't feel right. Pastor, husband of another wife having an affair with my mama, something doesn't feel right. How do you know that? This is what we have to wrestle down to the ground. Who determines what is right? And if you determine what is right, this is where we have an issue, because this is where many of our regrets in life come from. Because if I determine what is right, what I thought was right at the time, in the moment, because it felt right, when we look back at our lives, now knowing what we know, we recognize looking back that we were actually wrong with some of the decisions that we made that led to pain, that led to consequences, that led to bitterness and resentment. So if we still have those regrets today, then obviously I probably can't be the determiner of truth for my life. See, if I would have done what was right back then I wouldn't have the baggage that I have today. If my teachers or my parents would have done what was right back then I wouldn't carry the scars that I carry today. See, if I would have only done what was right, then I wouldn't have some of the regrets that I have. So I want to get really practical with us today, but I'm afraid that some of you, this is going to become extremely complicated for some of us. So just bear with me because we're about to get very logical with our thinking. Okay? So how do you and I get on the front end of making these bad decisions and missing the target with our decisions that we make that lead to regret? How do we get on the front end of these things? How do we hit the bullseye without regretting moments or years later the decisions that we made? And I believe the first thing, let's get very practical with this, that we have to do is that you have to decide who gets to determine what is right for you. It's a decision that we all have to make. And if I were to use a church phrase here, I would ask the question, who's the Lord of your life? Meaning, who's the leader? Who calls the shots in your life? Who do you follow? Who's the determiner of what is right in your life? And so if you've got to make that decision. If that's you or your parents or your teachers or God, whoever that is, you've got to decide. And then the second thing, logically from here, I want you to play that decision forward while remembering your past regrets. So let me play this out for you for a second, okay? If the choice to number one is your parents, then play that forward while looking back at your life. So if mom or dad, they decided that it was right to make that decision for them and your family, and they are still dealing with the pain, you are still dealing with the consequences, the bitterness and the resentment of that decision, then you have to admit logically that your parents are not good determiners, even though they're nice people, they're not good determiners of what is right for your future and what is right. Okay? So let's play it out again. You know, if the choice to number one is you are the determiner of what is right for your life, then play that forward while looking back at your past. Okay? So if what you decided was right in that moment because it just felt right, a couple weeks ago, a year ago, but you're still dealing with the pain and the consequences and the regret of that decision, then you have to admit logically that you are not best suited to determine what is right for you. Think about it. Now, you can learn from your mistakes, yes, but let me point something out. You thought it was right at the time, or you didn't even care. So how do you know that you will not regret a decision in your future if you are the one who determines who is right in your life? You can see where this is headed, can't you? I mean, someone higher than us, than humanity, has to call the shots on what is right for us. Humans cannot determine what is right for other humans. Someone other than. The Bible calls it holy. Someone set apart from humanity has to do that for us. And he did. His name is God. He's already set it up for us for what's right. So let me use God's words here, recorded by the prophet Isaiah. He said this, "My thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." See, friends, if we submit to God as the sole determiner of what is right for us, because his ways are much higher than our ways, hear this, we can actually live a life without regret and actually hitting the target that God has set for us. We can actually do it. So, for Yashovaham, a determiner of what was right in his life was King David, a godly figure in his life. Because it's written about King David that he was actually a man after God's own heart. So as Yashovaham followed David, he was actually following the heart of God. Now, did David get it right all the time? Absolutely not. He blew it in several cases. He completely botched things. But the principle is this, of doing what was right, even when the odds were against him, were ingrained in Yeshovaham as a God follower. And he knew that he had to stay and fight for what is right by God and by David. See, friends, here's the deal. We are all prone to not hit the target of God's holiness for our lives. None of us can actually hit the target. Do you know that the word sin in the original Greek language actually means to miss the target? That's what the word sin means. All of us miss the target. But here's the thing. Because of God, we don't have to miss the target from this point forward into our future. Because by following him, God has already shown us the right way, the truth, and the life. His name is Jesus. And so we can, as we learn from him and follow him, we are able then to be able to do what is right, even when the odds are against us. And so here's the thing. It behooves you and me to sacrifice what we think is right and the things that we want with our lives. And when we get to know God and his ways and follow the ways that Jesus taught us and modeled for us, here's the thing that happens. His Spirit within us begins to mold us and shape us and give us the power and the wisdom to actually hit the target and make the right decisions that will no longer lead to regret in our lives. See, friends, here's the thing. I don't want you to walk out of here today thinking that this is about behavior modification. I'm just going to try harder in 2018 to hit the target. We've got to be careful. This is not about behavior modification. This is about life transformation from the inside out. When you and I cooperate with the Spirit of Jesus within us and we make our decisions, when we submit ourselves to Jesus the right way, the one who is truth, the one who is righteous, when we do it his way, his Spirit can lead us to the point where we no longer have regret in our lives. Why? Because he's the ultimate source of what is right for our lives. But friends, don't be mistaken. It's not all on the Spirit of Jesus. It takes a lot of hard work in our lives as well to cooperate with the Spirit of Jesus. Now, recently, I switched gyms. And so when I say that I switched gyms, I mean that I stopped paying for a membership that I wasn't using. And I actually now started paying for another membership that I am using now. And it's much harder on me. I really love my new gym. The thing that I love about it is the people that I'm meeting. It's built for community. My other gym wasn't built for that. I love the fact that this gym plays the music really loud. That way I can't hear myself huffing and puffing on the gym equipment. I love that it's real close to my office, and so I can just go there right after work. And I love my new gym. But here's the thing about it. I chose this gym because of its accountability system. Let me explain what I mean. So this gym is set up in such a way that if I choose not to come that day, they'll actually charge me more money. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Erica was like, don't you ever miss. All right? So they will literally charge me more money if I don't show up to that particular day, okay? So because of this, that's why I chose the gym. So now I just have to show up, the coaches tell me exactly what to do, and I don't have to think about it. I chose this gym because of the accountability. Now here's the thing. Last year, I knew that it was the right thing to do, to go to the gym, to work out, to kind of take care of the body that God has given to me. I knew that it was the right thing to do. I just wasn't doing it. Anybody else with me? All right? So I went to great lengths this year to be able to then do what I knew was right. Can anybody else relate with this? All right? That you're not actually doing the things that you know are right to do. Anybody with me? Okay? You know this. I think we're all in that. You know what's right, you just can't do it. Maybe it's because of the peer pressure or the financial reason that your family's in. Maybe it's because you like donuts better than broccoli, right? But I think this is all of us. In fact, the great church planter, the missionary leader, the writer of 2/3 of the New Testament, he got us with this. See, the Apostle Paul, he wrote this, "For I don't understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate." Paul could totally relate to us on this. Spiritual giant of a man that he was, he could not do what was right for him, just like us. But I want you to see something else that he wrote as he battled this in his own life. He wrote a letter to a group of people called the Corinthian church, and he wrote this, "For we aim at what is honorable." See, we know the target. We aim at it. We want to do what's right. We're shooting at it. The target is to do what's honorable. We know it, but he wrote this, "Not only in the Lord's sight, who is the determiner of what is right and honorable, but also in the sight of man." This is a big deal. This imagery is crucial for us as we kick off this series. If we want to live a life without regret, this is a big deal. And so I dug into this. I don't know if you do this when you study the Bible. I'll pull out all these different commentaries and read just on that one verse. And then I'll kind of compare translations to what it is that God might be trying to teach me, because this verse jumped out at me and what God wanted to teach us in all of this. So I did that same thing. And the NIV translators did something that just leapt into my heart, and I think it's worthy of us as we start out this particular series. Because look at how NIV translated that same verse. Look at this. "For we are taking pains to do what is right." You see what Paul's talking about here? And I think, I'm not necessarily sure I agree with the actual translation, but it sort of jumped into my heart here of maybe what Paul's trying to get to. Because if you know what is right, you know what the target is, but you can't seem to do what is right, then I've got to take great pains to actually make that happen, the accountability system at the gym, right? So when we do the hard work, and we discipline ourselves to actually do what is right, when we are accountable to God and other people in our lives, like this tight circle of David's mighty men here, so that even when the odds are stacked against us, it becomes natural for us in the face of temptation, when we know the right thing that we should do, actually becomes the thing that we do because we've practiced it over and over. We keep showing up. Because listen, when we do what is right in the face of temptation and opposition, here's the power that we have as the church. We can actually enhance the reputation of God in the eyes of people who are watching us. And that's what Paul's trying to teach us here. And that's a life that has no regret if you're aiming at what is honorable to God. In the process, you're then aiming at what is honorable to other people, and everybody begins to rise. Everybody gets better. That's what Paul's talking about here. See, knowing what is right is not enough. We've got to do what is right. We've got to put in the hard work so that it becomes natural for us to do. And just like Chevalier, just like Martin Luther King Jr., these men were fighting for more than just themselves. Paul, he was fighting for God's reputation in face of opposition of a very, very hostile world that he was preaching in. So Chevalier, he was fighting for David, and David was fighting for his king, God Almighty, completely outnumbered. Martin Luther King Jr. was fighting for his king. His leader was named Jesus. And he was fighting against an entire nation and culture of prejudices and systems of oppression and hatred and racism. See, all of them were fighting as God's children to determine, as God determined what was right for them, not what the culture said, not what their friends said, not at what the systems around them said. And they were going to shoot every last possible arrow that God gave to them at what God determined what was right. And if they were to stand up here right now and to address all of us, I would guess that they would say that they were then living a life without any regret at all. Were they perfect? No. But did they have regrets? No. Because they shot every possible arrow at what God said was right. See, friends, I don't want you to live a life with regret. But it's going to take hard work on our parts and knowing what God says is right and living very intentionally for us to actually hit the target that God has set for each and every one of our lives. See, that'll speak for generations to come. Generations will be talking about you because of what you did was right in God's sight and in the eyes of others who are watching your life. Something to think about today. I'm going to hand things over at your campus to your campus leader now.